It's funny, I got an internship at this popular studio in Detroit, and time I wanted to get into music production. When I started, working with a few artists there, I booked some shows for them, and I would set up music videos for them, and, all this other stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is more so my speed. I like this, it's behind the scenes. I like the pace of it and, all this other stuff. And the more I got deeper into it, I'm like, it's tough being an artist. You can put your everything and then some. It's still no guarantee. And so it's you obviously have to, because you're passionate about it. And that's kind of what really got me thinking about it as far as in the role that tech can play with helping artists. It's one of the big things, especially now that I'm really big on, is the whole idea of as far as increasing artists' earning power.
What's up, Unfound Nation? Dan Kihanya here. We are back after a couple of weeks off to end the summer. Thanks so much for checking out another episode of Founders Unfound. That was Isaac Lymon, founder and CEO of Raxplay, which enables music artists to perform live real-time concerts via virtual reality. This VR platform lets fans be front row in the VIP or backstage, all in the comfort of their own home. As the song goes, Isaac was born and raised in South Detroit. At an early stage, he was called to music. It was then that he really came to appreciate the power that technology could have on the industry. And like many famous tech entrepreneurs before him, he made the tough call to pursue his startup dream instead of focusing on college. A hustled for internship, a hackathon, and a call from Google startups followed, and so Raxplay was off and running. Isaac has a great story. You'll want to listen in. Our episode is sponsored by Aperture Venture Capital, a seed stage fund reimagining startup investing for the multicultural mainstream. Founding partners William and Garnett recently announced their inaugural $75 million first fund, focused on diverse and female founders. But Aperture is double-clicking on changing the VC narrative. They also want to showcase the voices and stories of diverse entrepreneurs. Do you feel like you have a great story to tell? They want to share it at aperturevc.com/founders. Head over to their site or look for a link in the show notes. And please make sure to subscribe to the podcast. We're available anywhere you get your podcasts, even YouTube. And if you like what you hear, please drop us a 5-star review on Apple or podchaser.com. It makes such a difference as we try to grow our podcast. And while you're at it, why not tell a friend about us? Now, on with the episode. Stay safe and hope you enjoy. Hello, and welcome to Founders Unfound, spotlighting the best startups you don't know yet. We bring you stories of exceptional founders from underrepresented and underestimated backgrounds. This is the latest episode in our continuing series on founders of African descent. I'm your host, Dan Kihanya. Let's get on it. Today we have Isaac Lymon, founder and CEO of Raxplay, which enables music artists to perform live real-time concerts via virtual reality. The platform lets fans be front row, VIP, backstage, all in the comfort of their own homes. Welcome to the show, Isaac. We're super excited to have you on. Thanks for making the time.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Dan. I'm super excited.
Awesome. So I gave it a shot, but just in case the listeners didn't quite get it, why don't you tell the listeners, what is Raxplay exactly?
Yeah, so Raxplay is an immersive music company. We enable music artists to perform live real-time concerts in VR. The pretty cool thing about it is, you're in a virtual environment and, as a fan, you have an avatar. You can be front row, backstage, VIP, whether you're at home or you're with friends or whatever. But it's pretty cool because, what we're building is a world within itself.
It's so amazing to think about what the future is going to be for things like this. So we'll dig more into what Raxplay is in a little bit, but let's hear first a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where are you from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am from Detroit, Michigan. I grew up about 20 minutes south of Detroit. So born and raised there. I recently moved out to LA about 6 months ago. It's funny, with COVID and everything going on, the day that I landed was the day that they issued lockdown orders. You're in a new city, new place, and nothing is open. So, you spend a lot of time walking around the block and oh, that's a CVS. That's cool. So there wasn't a lot of exploring in the first 2 months. But yeah, born and raised in Detroit. And, with the recent growth and traction with Raxplay, it made sense moving out here, being that we are a we are a tech company, though. We're a, music tech company. So it made a lot of sense to be out here, being that a lot of our partners, customers, and investors were all out here.
So let me ask you, did you grow up downriver?
So I actually grew up in Belleville, Michigan, which is not too far from Ann Arbor. And if you're a Michigan fan or a U of M fan, then you're familiar with Ann Arbor. But I grew up not too far from Ann Arbor. It was a small lake town. Like whatever you imagine, your small Midwest town to be, that was pretty much Belleville. So it was pretty cool, though. I enjoyed my time there.
I actually lived in Michigan for several years. I worked for Ford. And so I lived in Ann Arbor and went to work in Dearborn. So I'd go by Belleville every day. Well, that's great. So tell us a little bit more, though. Do you have brothers and sisters?
So I am actually the second child. I have an older sister. Alexis. She's 3 years older than I am. A younger brother who's like 15 months. We're 15 months apart. And then I have a baby sister who's 10 years old. There's 4 of us. We're all pretty close. It's funny. The other day, my older sister just got engaged, and it was, this whole big ordeal because, we come from a really big family. Like on my mother's side, my mother is the 9th child. So it's a whole army of aunties. And so you can only imagine what like the last 2 days has been since they all found out that she got engaged. And I was talking to her fiance. I'm like, man, I hope you're ready because this whole wedding, man, like.
I'm sure they were all like, this is not a drill. This is not a drill. Let's go into wedding mode. That's funny. So growing up, did you have any, we always like to explore. Did you feel like entrepreneurship was something, even if you didn't know what that word was? Did entrepreneurship appeal to you? Or what did you think that you wanted to do as you were growing up?
So that's a really good question. So I like to say I have a non-traditional background, working in tech. But it's funny, for me, like going the whole like entrepreneurial route was a no-brainer. My father actually ran a cleaning business, at night, go out and, clean restaurants and all that stuff. And, that was how he was able to put food on the tables. And he instilled in my brother and I, like, hey, like, if you want something, you're going to have to work for it. So whether that was like a new pair of shoes or, whatever it may be, is, you have to work for it. So I remember vividly over the summer, my brother and I will always go to work with our dad and traveling across around the state. Once winter hit, my brother and I, we really enjoy the winter time because it means snow, and snow means snow days, and snow days mean money because we'll go out and we'll shovel snow. and it is funny. That's kind of like where I guess you could say like where my entrepreneurial drive came from, which is super cool. And like at the time, I was like, man, I don't want to do this. When, it's like it's 2 a.m. and you're like scrubbing floors and squeegeeing and mopping and all that other fun stuff. But it instilled in me what I needed to do. It instilled in me what was necessary for me to do what I'm doing right now. As I got older, started looking at different things that I wanted to do. And, for me, it was a no-brainer because I always loved music and I always loved business. So music business, I would get into the music business. And
so tell us a little bit about that. Tell us like how did music become a passion for you?
The young 13, 14-year-old, music's my life, super passionate, that was me. And it was funny. Growing up, I was on the wrestling team, believe it or not. So I was on the wrestling team and, that was pretty much what I did, day in and day out. And we had a keyboard and I started messing around with it. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Then I got a guitar. I started playing around with it. A couple of my friends that had a bass or a drum set, they'd come over and we'd just kick it. And I'm like, I want to go into music. And fast forward, 4 or 5 years later, I'm in school. I'm an adult now. It's funny. I got an internship at this popular studio in Detroit. And I wanted to get into music production. And when I started, working with a few artists there, I booked some shows for them and I would set up music videos for them and, all this other stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is more so my speed. I like this, it's behind the scenes. I like the pace of it and, all this other stuff. And the more I got deeper into it, I'm like, it's tough being an artist.
Yeah.
Just watching it. I mean, you can put your everything and then some. It's still no guarantee. And so it's like, you obviously have to because you're passionate about it. And that's kind of what really got me thinking about it as far as in the role that like, tech can play with helping artists. It's one of the big things, especially now that I'm really big on, is the whole idea of as far as in increasing artists' earning power. Nowadays, there's a lot of focus on, as an artist, you can make money here, you can make money here, you can make money there, you can also make money, like over there, and which is cool and all, but what's going on with the actual earning power? When it comes down to the revenue per stream, you can break into that, or as far as in like, branding dollars or merchandising dollars and, all these other opportunities for artists to monetize. But I think there should be a better focus on actual earning power, and increasing that earning power is one of the big things that I'm keen on. And I think one of the best ways to do so, which led to the founding of Raxplay, is through new technology and new experiences and, things of that nature. And so
makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure that exposure to the industry helped, kind of reveal like, hey, there's some opportunities to do some new things there. I'm curious though, like, how did you get this internship? I think a lot of people are always curious sort of how, it sounds like it was a very big event, ultimately in your sort of career trajectory and the origins of Raxplay. But like, did you apply for it? Were you selected for it? Like, how did it come about that you ended up at this, high cachet studio?
Yeah, so it's actually funny. I remember a friend telling me about the studio. I'm like, oh man, like this sounds really cool, and I'm like, I'm gonna go ahead and apply. I applied. I didn't hear anything back, so I called, and there's this guy there named Lamar. He picked up the phone like, who's this? I'm like, hey, this is, Isaac Lymon. I filled out a application, for the internship, and this, that, and third, and it's like, all right, man, like, forgot the day and the time that they told me to come through for the interview, but I did, and it went well. And they initially had you doing grunt work, which was cool. So I mean, you were cleaning like the first 4 months. You had to earn your keep. So which brought me back to the days when I was working with our dad, or when I was working with my dad, and we were cleaning and stuff like that. So it was cool. But eventually they started showing me like the ropes, and started meeting like the who's in, the Detroit music scene, and I started to pick up. I'm like, oh, so like this is how that works. I'll even, eavesdrop on, some of the conversations I'll be hearing, and, all that other stuff. So that's pretty much how I was able to land there. But you're right though, like it really did serve as a launch pad as far as in where I'm at now, and pretty much put me on the path that I'm, currently on right now.
I'm hearing definitely this entrepreneurial hustle, like picking up the phone. I'll be honest. I think my kids would be like, oh, well, I didn't get the job, or somebody else got the job. I mean, to be proactive and say, let me call and see what's going on and get the job. And then to come in and be humble and hungry enough to be, sort of like, okay, I'll just keep doing things, keep trying to take in what I can take in and look for opportunities to do more. To me, those are all part of the startup recipe, is to have sort of those hustle genes.
Yep. Yeah.
Were your parents encouraging about music and or business? Did they want you to like go to school and become a doctor or anything? Or did they say, do what you want?
So it's funny. Both my parents, they were both like super supportive of me doing what I'm doing. And, my pops was like a real old school guy. He refers to me as bullheaded. Yeah, bullheaded. And so it was just like, ultimately, he's like, look, yeah, I know you want to do what you want to do. When it's all said and done, just make sure that like you cover your bases. As long as you cover your bases, like you're good. And so they knew I was passionate about Raxplay and with what I was doing. And I mean, it's one thing to be passionate, and then it's another thing to actually put in the work. So they saw I was putting in the work, and I'm like, all right, like you're serious about this. There was a point in time when I was in school and I had a whole like career plan and, all this other stuff. And dropped out, I'm like, oh, I want to do music, which honestly I think is stupid. I know it sounds crazy, but not a good idea. Like I've looked up, don't get me wrong, I've worked hard, but I've definitely looked up as well. I believe everybody's situation is different. And, like when I was looking at the pros and cons at the time, the pros made sense. And like now like it's definitely paying off. But one of the things I personally don't buy into is like dropping out of college and thinking like everything's going to be like this, rainbows and sunshine. But I am thankful for like the path that I am on, and and all the stuff that, we were able to accomplish, thus far.
That's great. And we're going to hear more about that path for sure. But we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back with Isaac Lymon from Raxplay.
I love that I'm building something, most importantly, that really matters and that can change the world in a very relevant and necessary way.
By being able to run my own business and be able to write my own check, as a lot of Americans would like to be able to do, I want to be able to be a bright, shining example of exactly how to make that happen.
Hi, we're William and Garnett, founding partners of Aperture Venture Capital, VC for the multicultural mainstream. Aperture is a $75 million seed stage fund reimagining the startup landscape for diverse and female founders. If you're listening to this amazing podcast, you already know diverse and female founders have largely been ignored by the VC industry. Aperture is making it our mission. We want to elevate those voices. So if you're a diverse founder, we want to showcase your story. Come share your voice and your founder's journey at aperturevc.com/founders. That's APERTURE VC.com/founders. Thank you very much.
So we're back with Isaac from Raxplay. So Isaac, I want to delve a little bit before we get into Raxplay. You mentioned this idea of going to school and have a career plan. Like, what was that? And when was the deciding moment when you said, okay, I'm just going to go do Raxplay instead of that career plan?
So I was going to school and getting a degree in finance. I wanted to get into it as far as like the whole like banking world at the time. I feel like it's weird because, a lot of people are like, oh, I have a passion for finance, this, that, and third. I'm like, no, I want to make a lot of money, which is funny because I was 19 at the time. I'm 23 now. I'll be 24 this year. But I was thinking, I'm like, I don't feel comfortable with living with the what if hanging over my head. And my rationale at the time, I'm like, hey, the amount of time it's going to take me to like build Raxplay, it's like the same amount of time going to school, working your way up, working your way up at a job. For me, I'm like, it is going to take like the same amount of time. So if I'm going to put in the work as something that I really do love and enjoy, which was music business, which really got me deep into music tech. Yeah, I'm a keen believer in doing what you're passionate about, even though it's super cliche. I'm a very purpose-oriented person, and, I feel this was more in line with like my overall purpose. But that's pretty much how it happened. And, again, my whole rationale was like, well, it's going to probably take the same amount of time.
So tell us, when was the moment when you said, okay, I'm going to make this a business and I'm going to go for it?
So it's funny. I spent a lot of time tinkering around. Summer 2018 all the way to summer 2019. Summer 2019 is when Raxplay was actually founded. Or I got into an accelerator specifically for college-age students at the time. And the accelerator focused on the whole lean startup model. So the accelerator was specifically for the customer discovery process, interviewing potential customers or your ideal customer and finding out, are you even solving a real problem before you establish your value proposition? And when I got into that accelerator, that's actually when I met my co-founder, Carlos Shields Davis. At the time, I was tinkering around with like a music streaming, music networking, music community idea, which I'm happy it didn't go through looking back because it wouldn't lead to where we're at right now. And Carlos was focusing on this whole like VR social app. And like instantly, like Carlos and I, we just clicked because we're two different people. And it's funny because like Carlos is like very like stoic and, all this other stuff. And I'm energetic, like, hey, how you doing? And, personality wise, we just clicked, like work styles, like we just clicked. And when he and I got together, we're like, okay, like it's time for us to like really double down because we got something here.
That's so important. I mean, when you find a partner, I mean, startups it's kind of a team sport, right? And having somebody who's like, oh yeah, I get it too. And we can make this big can definitely be energizing and catalyzing to taking that big step.
Yeah, I actually remember the day. That was June 2nd of 2019. And it was funny. Shout out to TechTown Detroit because TechTown Detroit are the ones behind that accelerator program. And I like to consider TechTown like as our home base. because they gave us space to work and all this other stuff. And there's a lot of mentor and advisors that we still work with to this day over there at TechTown. But Carlos and I, we pretty much was hammering it out every day there over there at TechTown, and we would just get on a whiteboard. There's a lot of room for opportunity when it comes to music and VR. Live concerts is just, one segment of that. And so pretty much we were hammering out as far as, what Raxplay would be. A few weeks later, there was this hackathon sponsored by Bose and Capitol Records, which was really cool. Carlos and I, we were like, oh, this is perfect because, being a VR music tech company, I mean, they were doing AR, but like, hey, like, immersive technology music, like, hey, we need to check this out. And we went ahead and did so. And that was probably the most stressful, because we still joke about it to this day, but that was probably the most stressful 48 hours of our lives that particular weekend. Through that whole process, we actually ended up meeting our CTO, Norvell Robinson. He ended up joining our team after the hackathon because we ended up placing in third place. But it's funny because we didn't really have the best hardware. Mind you, we're about like 80-90% done with the build. Somebody walks over and the laptop gets unplugged and the laptop completely restarts. I mean, like, clean slate. Now we got to start over. It was terrible. when one of the guys, walked around and he was like, what have you guys been doing all this time? You guys are supposed to be prepared. And Papa put it bluntly, he was pretty rude. And it's funny because there's still teams to this day, or people from teams to this day, like, hey man, how you talking to you guys? Like, that wasn't right because like we were like the only group of young black dudes there. So, just the way he was talking to us, we were like, yo, like, this isn't cool. And I remember that experience, because, I was trying to be a good sport, so I took it on the chin. It's funny because, like, Carlos, I'm just watching Carlos. Carlos, like, he's not talking to me. Hey, Carlos is just going about his business, which is funny because, I don't know, I'm keen on treating people with respect. So it's like, when you guys just belittling people, or I don't think that's cool. There's always a better way to communicate or solve problems. But ultimately, we end up working through it. And which I mean by that, like, we spent that entire night working till like 3 a.m, getting the project back together. And then that Sunday morning, we got back together and we ended up taking third place. And then we continued working with the Bose AR team for like about 6 months on some like prototyping stuff and things of that nature. Before that 6 months, that accelerated program ended up finishing, and we ended up winning a $15K grant. We did a pitch competition. So we ended up placing in first place, $15K grant. And then came along the whole like G-Beta Music Tech Accelerator backed by Capitol Records, which the whole Capitol and Bose thing was in partnership with the G-Beta Music Tech Accelerator. The whole purpose of that hackathon was pretty much to like identify teams that they can get in their accelerator. And so a few months later, we continued working with Bose on the AR project. And then, we also started working with Capitol, did a few live activations, tightened up our business model. We really got an inside look on it as far as like how the industry really works and the nuts and bolts. And
so that's a great story. That's a great arc. And I hear a lot of building conscientiously and trying to ensure, that, like you said, the discovery's there, the product, the tech, it's all aligning and creating momentum as a team, which is an awesome story. But tell us a little more detail about how Raxplay works. Like, what does it actually do? And give us a kind of a use case of how it would be out there in the world.
Yeah, so I love it. Okay, so pretty much if you're a person who owns a VR headset, pretty much you go on like the Oculus platform, you go on Raxplay platform, you see as far as what available shows is out there. You are made aware of a show like ahead of time. So really what it looks like, oh, like this artist is performing at 7 p.m. Eastern time. When you put on this headset, watch this show. On the artist side, which is really cool, like we're working through all the tech right now, but on the artist side, there's competitors in this space that's also operating. But one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is that, one, we are operating in real time, and we're operating real time on a VR headset. So the artist has a full-on motion capturing suit where you capture the movements, facial expressions, lip readings, hand tracking, the whole 9 yards, and pretty much we track all of that. And so all that information goes to the artist's avatar, or the mocap system is right to the artist's avatar. And as the artist is singing and dancing, the fans pretty much are just watching that happen in real time. And so one of the things that I personally think is like really cool about this is the whole idea that when you're in the environment, you can be 2,500 miles away from, one of your best friends. And here you guys are in your avatars right next to each other. You can take a photo in VR and then like post it online like, hey, I'm at so-and-so concert. And I think that idea is like just crazy. We live in a world already where, we exist on the internet, but I think that just kind of takes it to a new level. And so from the user standpoint, as we mentioned, there's actually like a VIP like area where you can get into. There's also a backstage area that we're currently working through where you can actually meet the artists. And I think it's like really cool when you go and take a photo with a, 30-foot, whoever the artist may be. And it's like, hey, like, this is me and so-and-so. Like, see, like, check it out. I think that whole idea is cool. One of the big things that we're really doubling down on, the idea of, virtual goods and, the value that virtual goods pretty much like, there can be value for virtual goods in the virtual world, but really we want people to realize these values of virtual goods in the real world. And that's one of the things that we're really working through. So that's pretty much how Raxplay works, where you put on the headset, you watch the show live, you can meet up with friends. There's little activities you can do before the show. There's activities you can do after the show. We're working on archiving all our shows. So after the fact, you can always go back to this particular concert, and there's some things that we're looking to do on that particular front. That's pretty much the Raxplay concert experience. You put on the headset and, you watch your favorite artist perform live.
And the business model is basically parallels the in-person experience, right? With tickets and merchandise and experiences that are for sale, so to speak.
And, long term, we pretty much see, virtual concerts, being our bookstore, where, Amazon, they started out with books and then eventually they moved on to as far as in areas that kind of complemented what they're already doing. And long term, we're looking to do something similar. The world is opening back up. We hear it all the time. Oh, so, the world's opening back up. Like, what does this mean for Raxplay? And, our seed round would be closed out if I had $1 for how many times I've heard that. But it's funny, when we look at our market positioning, we don't really see ourselves competing with, in-person concerts if you look at the overall experience that we're looking to deliver. But I say that to say is, concerts is simply our first step, but really the long-term play is where Raxplay is a platform that just hosts pretty much, artist experiences. So rather that is concerts, NFTs, particular like plot points, within their career, like you go into a specific artist gallery and you can find it all there. And that's ultimately the long-term play of Raxplay.
Makes sense. And it's a great vision. And I think you're right? I think sometimes people just have this knee jerk before COVID or when COVID was happening, like all these things are going to disappear. So if you have a company in travel or events, you're dead, right? And then post COVID, people are saying, well, if you were in the virtual and digital world, that's all going to go away. And neither is true, right? I mean, we're living in a hybrid world.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be opportunities for all that. So that's great. Well, we're going to take another short break and we'll be right back with Isaac Lymon from Raxplay.
I love that I'm building something, most importantly, that really matters and that can change the world in a very relevant and necessary way.
By being able to run my own business and be able to write my own check, as a lot of Americans would like to be able to do, I want to be able to be a bright, shining example of exactly how to make that happen.
Hi, we're William and Garnett, founding partners of Aperture Venture Capital, VC for the multicultural mainstream. Aperture is a $75 million seed stage fund reimagining the startup landscape for diverse and female founders. If you're listening to this amazing podcast, you already know diverse and female founders have largely been ignored by the VC industry. Aperture is making it our mission. We want to elevate those voices. So if you're a diverse founder, we want to showcase your story. Come share your voice and your founder's journey at aperturevc.com/founders. That's aperturevc.com/founders. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're back with Isaac Lymon from Raxplay. So Isaac, tell me What's the big hurdle for a business like this? Is it getting the artists? Is it getting the fans? Is it the technology? What has been sort of the biggest challenge, if you can say that one is bigger than others? But what's been some of the biggest challenges for this so far?
Yes, I think what's the biggest challenge here is, I think as far as all of the hurdles, all the little hurdles are interlinked with each other. So you can't really have one without the other. And so navigating that is a challenge in itself. And I think that's the biggest challenge. So far, we're doing pretty good in regards to like navigating that. Like, to give you, an example, VR hit like mainstream roughly around 2015. And there's a lot of VCs that got burned initially when, VR companies first got into the scene.
Right.
And so, we fast forward to now, 5, 6, years later, the market looks a lot different than what it did back then. So I think that within itself is a challenge. It can be a challenge at times, but, I'm more so along the philosophy of like, if you're not a believer, I'm not really in the business of converting you. Either you're a believer or you're not. So I'll leave you where you're at, and in time, you'll come around, but I'm going to go where the believers are. And so that within itself is not a major challenge, but getting artists is not really as hard as people may think. It's a pretty interesting process, I will say that. I think the biggest challenge is, as far as in all of these particular hurdles are all interlinked to each other. So navigating it can be hurdles.
Interesting. And I'm curious your thoughts, since you're deep in this industry. If you had to guess, are we 2 or 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? How far away are we from VR without a headset?
Yeah, we definitely got some time as far as VR without a headset. We're looking at it at least, late 2020s, early 2030s. Because, I mean, if we look at as far as like VR headsets, a lot of companies are still working through as far as how to make the headsets comfortable and, figuring out as far as how you can get more bandwidth, out of these headsets and, making them smaller and, things of that nature. And so a lot of companies are still working through those particular sets of problems. So we got a nice 8 or 9 years for that to come into fruition. But in the meantime, what we're going to really start seeing is that VR and AR technologies is really going to become like a lot more comfortable. So if you look at the Quest 2 is like the best selling headset right now in the market. If I remember correctly, it's like a little over 3 million units that's circulating in the market right now. And it launched in October of 2020, which is not bad. So we are seeing these updates happen in real time and the progress, being made.
No, that's helpful. And, I think about my journey around mobile, and there was this gradual adoption, right? And then the iPhone came out and it kind of, took another leap. So VR is still in that early stage.
Yeah, it's actually crazy that you brought that up. I remember reading, it was like early on, like when we first started Raxplay, but I was reading this analyst and it did a comparison to mobile devices and VR devices. One of the crazy things for me is like, you definitely do still have your naysayers about VR. And again, I'm not really in the business of converting non-believers into believers. But if you look at the hard numbers year over year, it tells a very clear story as far as what is happening here in the market. Regardless as far as what I believe, regardless of what you may believe, these numbers tell a very clear story that VR is not only a growing market, it's growing sustainable, and this is a market where you need to pay attention to because it is here to stay. And I think what we're seeing right now, we're seeing all these bits and pieces like popping up, and within the next few years they're really going to start coming all together. But the hard numbers paint a very clear story in regards to as far as the growth of VR hardware and overall the adoption of VR technology. And I mean this specifically in regards to just even outside of use cases outside of gaming. But I think one of the big initiatives, or one of the big push as far as the for VR is where you're building use cases outside of gaming, to go ahead and reach mass adoption and go ahead and reach mass adoption. And
that makes sense. Wow, you really know this business. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to hear a little bit about Google and how all that came together.
It's pretty crazy because I didn't see it coming. They emailed me like a week before we actually sat down, and
they reached out to you.
Yeah, saying like, hey, like you made it to the final round for this grant. And I remember getting an email. I'm like, I don't remember doing an application, but I'm going to take this phone call. So
Had you actually done an application?
no, I was confused. So like, I'm like, hey, I didn't do an application, but I made it to the final round. So I'm going to take the call at least to just see what they're talking about. And, they were asking me questions, about Raxplay and what were our next steps and what we use the funds for. And they say, hey, we already made our decision. Like, here's $50,000. I'm like, oh, wow. So it really caught me off guard because I was not expecting that. And
So wait a minute, Isaac. A bunch of people are going to listen to this and say, it's like you found a wallet in the street full of money. Like you just got lucky in this app. There's got to be some connections, like somebody nominated you or Jewel was your neighbor or something, or like there's got to be some story behind the story.
it's funny. I'm pretty sure somebody nominated us. I mean, somebody had to nominate us. And I'm pretty sure it had to be somebody at TechTown or another organization that Raxplay is affiliated with. I wish I actually knew who nominated us because I wanted to tell them thank you. Unfortunately, I don't know, but I'm sure I'll find out. And so it was a surprise. It was a good surprise, Yeah, it was a good surprise. And one of the reasons being, being a young black team from Detroit, non-traditional backgrounds, it's a different ballgame that you're playing when it comes to the whole fundraising process. So, with Google stepping in, it was pretty much, the money's one thing, but really what it did was it pretty much validated that, hey, these guys are legit. What they're building on is legit. Like, this is something that you need to pay attention to. And then it really opened up doors for us to, hit some of the goals that we've been looking to hit within the last 6 months. So, the funding announcement and the fund itself, really enabled us to do so. And it's something that I'm super, 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 thankful for. If I'm being honest, I do feel as if there's, a lot of lip service when it comes down to, oh, we want to help black founders. 1% of venture capital goes to one black founder. We need to do something about it. Let's do something about it. And then nothing is done. And so it's really cool to see Jewel and Joey and Goody Nation and Google really step in, and we're gonna step in. We're gonna actually make something happen. And so it is very much appreciated. And I think even now we're starting to see more black, emerging managers, starting to come up, and we're starting to see different funds. Maybe it's my lack of experience, but as far as I'm concerned, I know the whole venture industry is built on the idea of as far as outlier results. And I mean, the whole method behind it is, pattern matching. And if we're really trying to get into the nitty gritty of it, it's pretty much like, hey, we're homeboys, so I'm gonna fund your company and we're gonna see what's going to happen. And I just don't see that being a good method. And so, which I'm sure we could dive into that, but that's just my 2 cents. So,
how do you think about fundraising, in terms of timing, in terms of what kind of investors you're looking for? Like you said, you moved to LA, which makes a lot of sense. That's entertainment, sort of mecca, and some of the venture folks or investors are affiliated in those spaces. But how do you think about fundraising kind of philosophically, I guess?
So there's definitely a few thoughts that I have. So, again, someone like myself that kind of comes from a non-traditional background, I realized really this whole idea of storytelling and you need a strong narrative, this, that, and the third. And, that's nice to have, but we have to show, or I think a team like ours, we have to show we can actually execute on a product and get features out there. We can actually get really good people on our team. I mean, really good people on our team. Hey, we can get, LOIs from, this company, that company. And, we really have to double down on that. And so, which is cool enough because I mean, at the end of the day, it is about, can this company generate an outsized return for my fund? I mean, that is the ball game at the end of the day. But to be honest, I really do feel as if it's a lot of, or the whole idea of it's a dark art. There's a lot of that when it comes to this fundraising and stuff like that. I mean, I've heard people say, the best founders, they don't need a pitch deck to raise funds. I sit on that statement and I'm like, it must be nice. So, and here's the thing, I'm not one to complain. I've always been one hey, I'm always going to get in on my own. And I'm going to do what I have to do to get from point A to point B. So like, I'm not really complaining. I mean, you get it how you live. But on the flip side, I'll be lying if there wasn't this sentiment where I'm like, I believe like the same metrics should be applied all around, you know? If I'll give you like a brutally honest example, you know, I remember like in 2019, we were looking to raise and we spent a lot of time trying to raise for funds. We spent a lot of time trying to raise for funds and pretty much it was like, hey, you guys are too early, come back to us, even though we had like, like labels in the decks, like, hey, like we're looking to shift our whole marketing budget to like this specific area, all this other stuff. And, here we are 2 years later, you have like funds that look you dead in your eye and, hey, it's been like 2 years, like why you don't have a product? Because we've been told we were too early for the last 2 years. And then you come back and look you in your eye and tell you're too early. It's like, I don't sit too well with me, but that's another conversation for another moment in time. But I don't know. I do believe there's a lot of good in the venture industry. I do believe there's a lot of good people working in the venture industry. And I believe there's a lot of good change happening in the venture industry, which we're all seeing right now in real time. The whole idea of signaling, I think that's just crap. Either, you're building a really good company and there's a really good team behind it. All that other stuff is
keeping it real. I like it. So one of the questions we like to ask is, sort of the go back in time. And let's say the version of Isaac that was kind of maybe before your internship. So you're like just before you're like trying to enter into this world and eventually become an entrepreneur. If this Isaac could go back and talk to that Isaac, what advice would you give him? What to look out for, what to do, what not to do?
I think first and foremost, just like, hey man, like stay the course. Just like whatever you do, stay the course. Like hold the line. But funny, before I met Carlos, I actually did try like the whole music tech idea with another team, and I actually learned a lot. In full transparency, just through that whole experience. Hey, like when you build a team, these are the things that you want to look for. You want to build a team with people that, that complement your skill set. I've always been like keen on the whole like ideas as far as where you double down on, something and, and you bring other specialists. Or I think it's relevant to like an early team because I know like there's people that's like, oh, everybody should be like a generalist, but to each his own. I really drive in that whole point. Keep your head low and just keep doing what you're doing. Like I'm pretty keen on that, like just staying under the radar, which is funny because like now this day and you're like, it's funny because everybody's like, oh, like the best founders build an audience on Twitter and,
Yeah, the social media, right? Yeah, there's a pressure to have, like you said, like to kind of like do your day-to-day out loud on Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah, I'm like, if you know me in real life, then you know there's things going on. So it's like, that's always been my philosophy. But I'll tell myself, yeah, like just stick to that and just stay the course and stay humble, stay hungry, stay focused. I definitely bumped my head a few times. So I definitely like, hey, when you get on, this corner right here, slow down, check and approach it like this, So hopefully he'll listen. I think he would. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say, isn't it? Although if you came and talked to me, I would be listening because you've done some things. So tell us, like, how on Foundation, our audience, how can we give us a call to action? How can we be helpful to you or to Raxplay?
So we are within the next 90 days. Our first VR concert will be going live, which is pretty exciting. A lot of hard work to get here. We've done like a lot of the building already. Now it's just more so artist side and other stuff. So be on the lookout for that. You can follow myself on Twitter at Isaac Lymon. It's just Isaac Lymon. Pretty straightforward. That's ISAACLYMON. And most importantly, follow Raxplay on Twitter as well for any and all updates. And that is Raxplay XR. And then just be on the lookout for Raxplay. Our whole mission, it's cliche because I feel as if it's cliche, right? Because like a lot of companies, our mission is to, change the world and this, that, and third, and, and it's not really changing the world. But our mission, Raxplay mission is ultimately to empower the digital artist. And, at the core of that, like we believe in a higher level of creativity, and so we think immersive technology is really going to open up the door of a new way to tell stories, a new way to share art, a new way to experience art. And Raxplay want to provide the tools. Raxplay wants to be the platform for this higher level creativity, and which I think would be a really, really cool conversation. It could get pretty left field, like when we really start diving into as far as some of these ideas. But I mean, there's just some really sick VR artists out there. Just be on the lookout for Raxplay.
I love it. And I can't believe we're already at the end of our time. This has been so awesome, Isaac. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
This was like super, super cool. Super excited that you had the chance to do this. Yeah, this was pretty cool. So I really did enjoy myself.
Good. Well, that's what we aim to do, right? This is a conversation, and it allows you to showcase all the greatness. So thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
We'd like to thank our guest, Isaac Lymon, and our sponsor, Aperture Venture Capital. This podcast was produced by yours truly, Dan Quijana. Additional audio editing and production by We Edit Podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, or simply go to foundersunfound.com/listen to. That's listen to. And follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn @FoundersUnfound. Thanks so much for tuning in. I am Dan Quijana, and you've been listening to Founders Unfound.